Let's take a look at how to sketch different tree shapes. So deciduous trees come in lots of shapes and sizes, and I have to say I always found it a little bit confusing as how to draw differently looking trees and render their characteristics so that you maybe even get a tree drawing out of it that actually looks like a specific tree. And then there are, of course, these basic techniques that can help you render trees so that they look believable, they have light and shadow, and so that they look three-dimensional. I'm starting with a very rough basic outer shape, and I'm adding in the darker trunk to this and the branches that branch out from this. And again, I've speeded the video up slightly so that we can take a look at different trees and not spend too much time on each of the single sketches. But you can see me adding in these different ellipses, these different clumps of leaves. And this is essentially what you want to be looking at if you want to draw a tree. You divide it up into these clumps of leaves so that you don't have just a big green blob, but you have these areas of the tree that are, each of them is round and each of them has a light and a shadow side, and you can add, like I do here, add a shadow to the darker side of the element. So basically, if you think of basic elements, think of a sphere that has a highlight and then a shadow side, and then you can break down a complex object like a tree into these basic elements. And I'm doing the same here again with an oak tree. And oak trees are sometimes pretty complex looking trees because they have these weird looking branches sometimes that stick out of the rest of the tree. But you can see the same principle I'm using here. I'm just drawing these ellipses for the different clumps of leaves that I can see, and I'm adding just a few shadows, just a few areas where you can see the branches, and I'm adding more and more ellipses, maybe even a few too many. But this oak tree has a pretty interesting, it's not even round, so it has a pretty interesting shape. So then bit by bit I'm adding shadows on the underside of the spheres. And what I'm also doing is refining the outline with more details. So I'm thinking here about the individual form of the leaves, about the characteristics of the leaves. Are they small? Are they round? And then I try to add these little irregular outlines around the outer shape of the tree, and also around a few of the inner elliptic parts around these inner clumps of leaves that I want to bring out more. And so bit by bit, by adding more branches, more shadows, and more of these textures, you can see the tree takes shape. So this is what a typical oak tree could look like. So a bit different from the beech tree above, more rectangular and a bit more chaotic looking, if you can put it like that. The next tree I'm sketching here is a birch tree. And so this is a young birch. It's still quite small. And I'm starting with a lot of squiggly and chaotic lines to render the outline of this tree. So in birches, there are usually less of these round leaf groups, these round clumps of leaves, but more, I find that most often the leaves are organized in this sort of, you could call it a chaotic carpet of leaves that just swings in the wind. And you have to find a way to show this and to render this. And the way I try to do this is show the outline that's slightly chaotic, and then just add a few shadows, a few small shadows here and there to add a little bit of three-dimensionality to the tree. Adding the titles quickly so that I can remember what this is supposed to be. And then for the last tree, I decided to add an evergreen tree. fir, because this also comes up quite often as a question from you, and so I wanted to have one of them as an evergreen tree. And the overall shape is quite different, isn't it? I'm thinking about these individual branches more like arms that are reaching out from the middle. And the first step is the same. I'm trying to do the overall shape. And then I need to work out the roundness of the tree by showing branches that point forward or point to the sides, and just branches that are pointing in different directions. And I can do that by foreshortening the branches and also showing shadows and showing which of them are in the background and maybe more in the shadow, and which of them point maybe more to the foreground and get more light. And this might seem more complex than rendering the other trees, but I find it's essentially the same. So instead of these group of leaves, you just have branches pointing in different directions. So I actually find it a bit easier than rendering deciduous trees. And adding color over these kind of sketches is quite easy because you don't have to do a lot of light and dark work. You already did this with the pencil sketch. And I decided I'd just add a little bit of green to these tree sketches to show you how easy it can be to have light and shadow with watercolor with these kind of sketches. So I have a lighter color, this light warm green, and then I have a darker green which has a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed in, and I basically apply this in all of the areas where I have my shadows defined. So I know where the shadows are based on my pencil hatching, and I can just drop in the darker color into my already wet wash. And I'm doing this for all of the trees, trying to find a characteristic green for each of them. But I have to say, in summer they almost look the same, all of them. And I use a technique for applying the color that I don't just slap on the color everywhere, but I try to leave little white spots and little pockets where there's no color at all, to show that there's a texture going on and a structure, and that this is not just a mass or a smooth surface, but that there are different leaves, different small elements that I want to show. And I'm doing the same technique for the birch tree. So I'm using an even lighter and warmer green for this one. And I'm thinking about these small, delicate leaves that birches have. Even adding a few dots here and there to indicate that there are loose leaves swinging in the wind. And for the fir tree, I want a darker green, a darker, warmer green. And the first thing that I'm doing is I'm applying a base color to all of the areas of my sketch. And then for the shadow areas, I will go back with a second layer and render them darker. So you don't have to get fussy with these kind of sketches. I worked very quickly on the first pass with my pencil, and now I'm working very quickly to get the color onto the page. So for the darker color, I add more blue, more ultramarine, and I'm dropping it in the areas where I've defined the shadows. And that's basically it. And due to all of it still being wet, the colors will blend into each other. If you don't want that, then you need to wait until everything is dry and then go over it with a second layer. And I'm also adding a few squiggly lines to the branches to show that there's more structure and more texture also in this tree. And that's basically it. This is what it looks like when everything has dried. And these are your different tree shapes. If you found this video useful, it's part of a longer video class called Drawing Ideas for Summer. In this video course, we will explore sketching nature in summer. And I will share lots of different ideas for drawing and how you can explore sketching outside in the warm season. We will go for a hike together and take a look at different field sketching techniques, and I'll share step-by-step demonstrations with you. We will explore drawing tree shapes and tree portraits, insects, painting small landscapes, sketching birds, and creating watercolor maps. This class is perfect for anyone who wants to get started or continue with nature sketching, and anyone who wants to keep exploring and learning more about nature in a creative way. Your skill level doesn't matter as long as you have curiosity and an interest in nature, so this class is great for sketchbook beginners. The whole course has over 2 hours of video, so I hope you will join me for this class to explore sketching nature in summer.